To everybody for your interventions. First of all, on my approach, my strategy, if you want, it is my aim to find the broadest possible majority. First of all, I think that's very important, although it's clear we're not going to find unanimity. But we'll try and find a broad majority. And secondly, and this for me is really key, this report for me is very much part of the package. I think all these files are interlinked. You cannot, take out one brick of the building and look at it in isolation, because this clearly is linked, as I said earlier, to Dublin, to relocation, to the procedures, but also, like it or not, to the Safe Countries file. Whatever you may think of it. Now, before I go into the details, just one reminder. What we're talking about here is not a problem, it's not a burden, it's not a threat. We're talking about people. People like us, with hands and feet and ears and noses. People who are parents, children, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles. People who have businesses, people who have dreams, people who are students. People, good people, bad people. Nice people, unpleasant people, like us. People, the same people who are living on this planet. That's what we're talking about. And what we want to achieve is that we deal with these people and we live with these people in the best possible way. And this whole package that we're looking at is hopefully a way of achieving that. Now, the purpose of the Commission of this recast was to reduce secondary movements. Yes, we share that purpose, but in order to achieve that, we also need to end the race to the bottom. Because the problem here is not just that individual people or families or groups of people decide to move from one member state to another. The problem is also that member states, as I said earlier, are trying to pass them on like a hot potato. Like we're going to make our country as unpleasant and unattractive as possible so that people will move on to another member state. That will have to end. And not only for practical reasons, but also for moral reasons. Because, Chair, no matter where we stand, no matter what political party we represent, we should all be deeply ashamed at some of the images that we see of the conditions that human beings are living in on this continent. Colleagues, we are the most prosperous continent in the world. Nobody should have to pass a cold winter living in a tent. Nobody. So, apart from those general principles, on the details, first to be very clear on labour market access, and in particular to Mrs. Mussolini, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We are not talking about giving jobs to people. We're talking about access to the labour market. Now, let's be realistic here. Chances of asylum seekers applying for a job are very, very limited as they stand. So if we're going to add on top of that a transitional period during which they will, disqualify themselves every day they sit around in idleness, as well as a labour market test, then you reduce their chances of finding a job to virtually zero. And what does that mean? That means that the hundreds of thousands of people, Mr. Leenaars, who has already left, who will stay in Europe, are probably never, ever, ever going to find a job anymore. And then they will actually become a lot more expensive than if we give them a little chance of finding a job. Are they going to compete with other people for a job? I don't think so. I don't think so, because their chances are so limited already. And I do not think that those people, and you rightfully point out that, there are people who are currently in Europe, who are unemployed, who are having a very, very hard time. But what we should be doing is not making it even harder for asylum seekers. We should help those people who are currently looking for a job with different policies. Okay. Now, so that's about labour market, because I think an asylum seeker who is self-reliant is actually more of an asset to society than an asylum seeker who's going to remain unemployed for the rest of his life. and probably his children too. I also think that it is, it's simply not sustainable, as it has been said by Anna Maria Corazza Bildt, by Bodil Valero and others, that in a country like Sweden, people do have chances of finding a job, and in Italy they will never, ever, ever find. I mean, we have to find ways to close or to reduce that gap, because that is precisely the reason that people go asylum shopping. We have to reduce that gap. I mean, that must be part of the broader package we're going to adopt. And of course, I can't remember who said it, but the asylum procedure cannot be a substitute for legal labour migration or any kind of labour migration. The asylum procedure is for people fleeing conflict or persecution. But that is why it is so crucial that at the same time we work on the blue card proposal and other ways of legal migration, because it is an illusion, a complete illusion, to think that people will not move. People who are living in poverty, maybe not in war zone, maybe not fearing persecution, but people who have no prospects in the place where they live, they will move. They will. Now, if we want to keep them out of the asylum procedure, they should have legal means of coming here. Because even if they come here and their application is rejected, we all know that they will stay because they prefer to live in precarious situations, going underground rather than going back. About detention, I totally agree with those who made very firm statements against the detention of children. I hope I misunderstood Mrs. Mussolini, but for me, detaining children can never be protection. I hope I misunderstood you. People should not be in detention. I mean, I don't see why we consider that, some people should. I mean, we don't think that any of us should ever be in detention. We would never consider that that would be a means of protecting us. So why should that apply to other people? Detention can only ever be an instrument where there is a very clear risk of absconsion, but that is something very different. It's defined in my proposal. As to judicial intervention, I was surprised by the statements. I think it was Mr. Halaau. I mean, we would expect that if somebody takes a decision to put us in jail, to detain us, that decision should be taken by a judge on the basis of a law and not by a civil servant or any other organisation, non-governmental organisation. No, anybody who is detained should be detained on the basis of judicial intervention. Then language courses for free. Well, for those people who can't afford it. If people can afford it, they can pay for it. But that's also specified in the report. So it's not free for all. It's free for those who cannot afford it otherwise. Then two final remarks. There is a big dilemma here. I mean, let's name the elephant in the room, because when you're talking about access to the labour market, and we're talking about people who are very likely or very unlikely to get their status granted, that means we're coming into the area of differentiated treatment, the list of safe countries. I mean, I find that a huge, huge moral dilemma, to be honest. At the same time, we also have to be pragmatic and see how we can find the best possible solution for the largest number of people. And finally, I reiterate what I've said before. Deals with Libya, deals with Turkey, deals with other countries are not an alternative for a proper EU common asylum and migration policy. They are not an alternative. So I have very high expectations of the Maltese presidency, I have to say, so I welcome your words, and I hope that we can advance as much as possible within the next 5 months by now, and to find real, sustainable and lasting solutions and not shady, unsustainable deals with countries that don't even have a proper government. Thank you.